Thank you for agreeing to do the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I was flipping through Reels the other night or the other morning, and I saw one of you. You must have been leading a seminar, and what was it called? It was called the Slow Man's 1031 Exchange. And I saw
Yeah.
the reel, and I was like, what is that? I gotta get in touch with this guy. Brian, thanks for joining, but let's tell everybody who you are and what you do so we can establish some credibility first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a tax lawyer and I'm heavily involved in real estate investing. I'm a partner at a law firm in Nashville, Tennessee. We have four offices: Nashville, Franklin, which is 20 miles south of Nashville, Huntsville, the DC office. I'm the tax guy at the firm. So I do a lot of transactions. For example, today I was looking over a tax allocation split for the purchase of a business that we're selling for a client. So that's kind of my day-to-day job is I look at tax provisions. I make sure we structure deals in such a way that they're tax efficient. But what you saw was me talking to a group of real estate investors, real estate agents, property managers, anybody that just is involved in real estate at all. And that was at the Nashville School of Law. And this is the third time I've done three seminars, two to this particular group, explaining things like cost segregation studies, bonus depreciation, the slow man's 1031, a regular 1031, a 721 UPREIT, a DST, Delaware Statutory Trust,
Yeah.
everything involved in real estate and how to unlock the advantages of real estate deductions to help not only shelter income, but create wealth. So a lot of people don't know about the slow man's 1031. And somebody asked me a question. So I was just responding to a question that came probably from a real estate agent. And they're like, I've never heard of that. I'm like, well, here's how it works. You can get all the benefits, but you have to buy up. So you have to scale up to offset the depreciation recapture and the capital gains that you're surely going to get hit with. And so that's what I was talking about. But a little bit about my background. I have a BA in history from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. Then I have a JD from Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. Then I earned an LLM in taxation from Georgetown University Law Center. And then I went to work for Ernst & Young in the McLean office as a consultant. And I use, air brackets
Air quotes.
pretty loosely because, this was right after Sarbanes-Oxley.
Mhm.
And they were effectively just sending us into clients to make sure they were not engaged in any type of tax shelter status. So that's what I was doing. And then eventually I made my way back to Tennessee, where I'm from. I joined a law firm here. Then in 2008, I'm a baby lawyer and the real estate market crashes. I remember the day Salomon Brothers went under, and then not long after, Lehman Brothers fell. And I remember the boxes being carried out, and our deal flow just stopped.
Yeah.
It's like one day we're blowing and going, and the next day there is just nothing, like nothing. And lawyers are getting laid off. It's the worst economy for lawyers in generations. It was miserable. But, I fought my way through it, and I'm a partner at a law firm now. So anything dealing with tax, real estate business, structuring, asset protection, and there's some litigation. I tend to do, it's called dispute resolution or a tax controversy work with the Internal Revenue Service. So I'll go to the United States Tax Court or to the district court to settle issues. Anything from the IRS says you haven't paid taxes to somebody's getting penalized for something they didn't necessarily do, but they could be responsible for. That's kind of what my day to day is. So that's my job on a regular basis. But the reason I was talking about real estate and the 1031 and the slow man's 1031 was I've written a book on real estate investing, and it's called A Lawyer's Guide to Finding, Funding, and Managing Your Real Estate. So it's called Replace Your Income, and it's available on Amazon. And that led to social media because prior to that, I was like everybody else. I would just get on social media. I didn't have TikTok. I didn't have Instagram. I had Facebook. And so, I get on Facebook and like, oh, here's a picture of my kid with catching his first fish. And it led to me actually having to say, hey, here's my book. Here's what it's about. which I'm terribly uncomfortable with. I think by nature, I'm probably an introvert. That's why I like to sit at my desk and look at problems and solve them. But yeah, it led to me actually going and doing speaking engagements. So now I speak on a regular basis and I try to demystify the tax code for people. That's really what I do.
Love that on all fronts. Got so many questions. Obviously, the baked ones that I sent you beforehand, but I guess I'm also fascinated with your journey from just being like everybody else to now you're out there and promoting a book. And maybe I do want to learn and spread the word for the audience. So maybe we start with that. What are, so from my perspective, the common benefits of real estate are, from a tax perspective, depreciation and interest rate write-off, but then you can do a cost seg, which is also known as accelerated depreciation. What are some of the other benefits of investing in real estate that I didn't name off?
Yeah, so I call it the delta between depreciation and depreciation. You buy a house for $100,000. Historically, real estate increases in value 3% year over year. That's been historic. However, since COVID, we're seeing massive jumps in real estate, which is creating these overnight millionaires. And I'm part of that group. I have 20 properties, and during the COVID years, they increased in value threefold. What I bought for $500,000 is now worth $1.5 million. We went in and borrowed against that overnight equity that we got, and we scaled up the properties. What does that mean? So it means I went from having one property, say, worth $100,000, and suddenly over COVID, it's worth 300. We go in and we borrow, say, $125,000, and we go buy more properties with it. That creates more cash flow, that creates more depreciation, and suddenly you're off to the races. And at some point, we had 33 doors, and my wife works full time. I'm a partner at a law firm, so we're like, oh gosh, how are we going to manage all this? We
Yeah.
self-manage, surprisingly. So what I would say to people that are listening is the delta between what you buy for versus what it's valued at, there's a gap in there, and that's your equity. And that equity increases. The market forces move that number. You don't have to do anything about it. Your tenant will pay down the debt, which increases your purchase equity. But the delta between what you owe and what it's valued at is really the sweet spot. And you want to go in and you want to grab that money, bank money, if you will, and then you convert that into more assets on the books that will generate more money for you. So it's a way of scaling. And what people need to understand is that's how wealth is created. Wealth isn't created by having $1,000 in the bank and owing, a $1,500 a month note on a new BMW and, living paycheck to paycheck. Wealth is actually driving a pickup truck, living modestly, and having assets that allow you to live whatever life you want to live. And it's also, real estate in and of itself is also the number one driver of millionaire creation in this country.
Yeah.
And if people knew that, they would understand the value of, hey, instead of buying my first house, that's at the max of my budget, maybe I should do something different. Maybe I should buy a starter home. And instead of just a single family starter home, maybe I should buy a duplex.
Mhm.
I can live in one side, I can rent out the other. I'll charge them enough rent that it'll create, income to me that will offset my mortgage payment.
At least just cover the mortgage payment.
It's called house hacking.
Yeah.
And if you house hack your way through your first purchase, then in a year or two, you move out and you go buy your next home and you do it again. You look back over 10 years, and let's say you've done it 3-4 times. Suddenly you've got an incredible amount of wealth that you had no idea.
Right.
And it's amazing how it works. So imagine, instead of, taking your year-end bonus or your yearly bonus you get from your company, and instead of buying that new car or going on that trip, you go and buy a piece of real estate. That's kind of what we've done. I make decent money as a lawyer, but I drive a pickup truck. I don't have a Porsche. I'm wearing this pullover, a pair of Old Navy jeans and some old boots and a ball cap. I'm not walking around in designer clothes. I'm just living modestly, knowing that my real estate is really what's going to be my exit out of the rat race.
Mm-hmm.
And if more people would just think about that, it is the only way that I know of, other than starting a business and running the business and selling it to private equity or to a hedge fund or something like that, which are few and far between for most people. This is how I can retire. And with just a little bit of investment I've made, I'll get millions back, millions. Show me a 401k, an IRA, or a SEP, or a simple that matches that kind of return. There's no way. You cannot save your way to retirement. You cannot do it. I've done the math. You cannot do it.
Yeah.
If you take into account cost of living adjustments, you've got to definitely take into account healthcare needs as you get older. There's no way. There is absolutely no way to save your way to retirement. You can't do it. And if you expect to live on Social Security, you're woefully uneducated about what it's going to take to live the rest of your life in this country.
Absolutely. Well, that's amazing. I fucking love it. It's great.
Now, I say that, but I'm also a big proponent of life insurance. I'm one of those people that learned about life insurance early in life, and I fund a lot of life insurance, whole life policies, and I use it as my own little bank.
Yeah.
So there's a whole life component to, or a cash component to whole life that, you know, if I want to go buy a property, I don't want to have to go to the bank, or I don't want to tap into my savings. I just call my agent and I'm like, hey, I need $50,000. And he'll just send me a list of all the policies I have and like, where do you want to take it from? And I'm like, I'll just take it out of these. And so like today we're doing something and FedEx arrived with the check in the mail. And so I don't have to pay it back if I don't want to. But yeah, so I'm a big proponent of boring investments, life insurance, real estate, mutual funds. You know, really you're the worst poster boy for boring investments. I really am.
It doesn't have to be sexy if it makes money. Think about trash collection. They've built empires called Waste Management, or here in Cincinnati, Rumpke. Like those are great companies that they're not sexy, but they generate great cash flow. So.
Yeah, they do. I've got a buddy that and this is an interesting story because it's how I got into real estate. We were out turkey hunting one day and we're just walking through a field, and he knows how much I work. And I'm one of those people, I'm always answering my phone and always texting, and I'm terrible. My wife will tell you, like, the phone is literally a part of me. And he saw me doing that. I was like, dude, you're working way too much. You need to be out here and enjoying yourself. I'm like, I can't. Like, there are only so many hours in a day, and I got to get this done. And, you know, I'm trying to do this with you. And he's like, have you ever thought about a coin laundry? I'm like, surprisingly, no. I've never thought about a coin laundry. Why do you ask? And he's like, well, and that's the business he's in. He opens and operates coin laundries for people, and then he services them. And he owns the largest route in the Middle Tennessee area. And he has 3 coin laundries himself. He's making a little over $4 million a year. Mm-hmm. Think about that. He's making $4 million a year. And I'm like, well, what's the depreciation on that? Because I immediately kick into tax lawyer mode. And I'm like, well, how do you shelter that? And you know, we started talking about the equipment and how fast you can depreciate the equipment. And then bonus depreciation, you overlay bonus depreciation on top of it. And depending on the years, like this, if it was between 2017 and 2022, you could take 100% bonus depreciation on it, write the equipment off, and you won't owe any taxes probably for the first year or two.
What is bonus depreciation?
Bonus depreciation is the ability to write off personal property in the first year of purchase in use in your business. It falls under section 168K. This year, bonus depreciation is 40%. Last year it was 60. Next year it's 20. So it's being phased out. And President Trump, in the joint session of Congress that he spoke to, said he wants to bring it back to 100% effective January 1, 2025. And it's a bipartisan issue. Both sides of the aisle want this. They want it because everybody knows small business is the backbone of this country.
Yeah.
We're also facing a housing shortage in this country of about 4 million houses. The government is not in the business of building housing.
Nor should.
So they want to incentivize people like me, people like you. Hey, we're going to make this easier for you, and we're going to give you a tax break through bonus depreciation, cost segregation studies. That's going to allow you to go out and invest, make some money, but you're also servicing the population writ large because you are out there giving houses to people that can't afford it. And I'm a big proponent of affordable housing. I think that I've done well in my life. My wife's done well in her life. We want to make money. We want to retire, but I'm willing to give back. And part of that giving back is we allocate a certain portion of our portfolio to affordable housing. So, for example, we have this portfolio down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we have converted 12 single family homes to Section 8.
Okay.
So these have new roofs, new siding, new windows, new kitchens, new appliances, new flooring systems. They're new gutters. They're new. All people really want is an opportunity, a safe and warm place to live, and to know that they're not going to get evicted. And so that's what we provide through our efforts of giving back to the city that we grew up in. And and look, along the way, we're going to make a little bit of money on it. And I'm fine with that. I took the risk. I should get the reward. But, real estate, we started this road that we've been on since 2018. I bought a coin laundry in 2016, sold it in 2017. And I did 4 things with the money I made. I paid off a student loan. I bought my wife a new wedding ring. I bought a couple of shotguns because I do like to hunt. And I bought my first short-term rental. In 2018, we bought 2 single-family homes. And then we sold that first short-term rental and bought 13 single-family homes down in Chattanooga. And that became the basis of our portfolio. And now we're at 20. We've been up as high as 33 and down to 20. Now we have a good mix of long-term, short-term, multifamily, single-family. And that all started with a $100,000 investment that I made into a coin laundry where I liquidated my retirement account to do it. And that portfolio right now is worth about $6.5 million.
That's a hell of a return on that.
Yeah. I mean, we're really happy with where we are, but it hasn't been without sacrifice and work. But I don't know of anything else I could have invested in 2016, 2017, that 9 years later would be worth $6.5 million.
What do you think the hardest part was? Just making the decision to go ahead and do it?
For me, it wasn't. For my wife is really risk averse and very conservative, like when it comes to money and what we're going to invest in. She always thought, oh, I'll just contribute to my 401k. And when I'm 65, I'll retire and, I'll live that life. And then me, I've had my own law firm. I've had my own employees, and now I'm a partner at a firm, and I'm a little bit more willing to take the risk. So I was like, well, I'm going to do this. I know you didn't want to be involved in the coin laundry, but I'm doing this because I know the tax benefits associated with it. And if we can just work this much harder than everybody else, we should be okay. And we're doing fine. That portfolio generates about 20 to 22,000 a month in cash flow.
So the net after your debt service.
The net after our debt service in Chattanooga is like 14,000.
That's still great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Like, we're real happy with it. We don't spend any of the money. We reinvest it. We pay down debt. We maintain the properties. We pay the taxes. We make sure everything's taken care of, and we just reinvest it. So if we have a month where, we've got some extra money, we're like, all right, well, let's go drop it on this note over here and pay that down. And so that kind
So
of,
essentially, you're building equity that way so that if you decide to do a refi or at the sale, you are just recapturing that equity. It's just probably the safest place you could put it.
yeah, the last few years with the spike in interest rates have kind of kept us on the sideline hoarding cash. But I think at this point, we're probably going to take that portfolio and contribute it to a syndication deal.
Mhm.
And that will allow us to take an equity stake in a real estate syndication deal as a general partner. And then, so there won't be a seller exchange, it'll just be a contribution of assets. And then, so that would allow us to pool our assets with a couple of other general partners based upon the cash flow, the total assets. We can go out and buy more and more. Just that portion of the portfolio is worth about 2.5 million. We would take that 2.5 million, like, here's our equity, this is our buy-in. Now we are part of a group that has $20 million under management. And so we're growing through utilizing relationships and partnerships to grow our wealth. This particular portfolio will stay affordable housing. And that's one of the requirements we made. That has to stay affordable housing. That's the promise we made to each other. And that's what we feel like we need to give back.
Did
There's
you put
lots of ways to do it.
a deed restriction on that? Or you just, but that's just what you're going to do?
No, it's not a deed restriction per se. It's just an agreement we have in the operating agreement that our contribution of these particular assets will remain affordable housing so long as these assets are under management by this particular general partnership.
And are you contributing those assets to that fund, you might say,
Yeah.
through like a DST or no,
No,
like an
so
UPREIT
the
rather?
assets will be free and clear. So they're held in an LLC, and we are either going to spin off the LLC and contribute the whole LLC into the fund, or we'll just retitle vis-a-vis a quitclaim deed. There won't be a tax repercussion on it.
Oh, I didn't know that you could do that.
Yeah, because it's still
You're transferring it to an entity that you're still in control of. So a quick
correct.
claim deed is just changing title,
Yeah, we're just
not
changing the
realizing
title.
a capital event.
Yeah,
I
it's
see.
not a capital event. So under section 721 of the tax code, which is the partnership tax laws, we're just contributing basically like my earpods into the company in
Yeah,
exchange for a pro rata share of the company.
interesting. That makes a lot of sense. I guess while we're still on this, I do want to get to your journey a little bit more though, but
Sure.
what are some other methods that you can utilize the tax code as it's currently written presently, but to one's benefit as a real estate investor or as a business owner?
Yeah, I think a lot of people they hear the word tax and they get,
I
creeped out.
get scared.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people do. And that's understandable. I think if people understood the tax code from a policy perspective, they would understand that, okay, well, I'm being incentivized.
Right.
For me, I looked at it, I'm like, okay, well, we have all these tax breaks for real estate, and that's why I utilize real estate so much. The cost segregation studies, the bonus depreciation, the section 163 interest deduction, things like that, section 162A expenses to run the business. That allows you to not only cash flow your business, take a tax deduction for it, but for most people, they get to live through their business. For example, let's say these earpods, were paid for by our LLC. Well, then this is a deduction. But look, I'm on the phone talking to you about real estate, right? So it's a deduction. My phone is paid for through our company. Imagine if you could make these above the line deductions instead of below the line expenses. If people understood that, they would realize, oh, this is actually a more efficient way to live, because the things you do every day in your life, you go to lunch, you probably talk about business at lunch, you talk on your phone, you use your earpods, you certainly use laptops. I've got one of my laptops right here. I was working for you before we got online. All this was purchased by my company. If I didn't have a company and I wasn't involved in real estate investing, these would all just be personal expenses to me that I have to pay. And I can't do that. So having these as above the line expenses instead of below the line expenses is much better for your overall tax picture. So if you could explain that to people, and I think most people get it once you walk them through it,
Yeah,
they understand, that is a better way to live. And so their tax bill goes down, but their life really doesn't change that much. In fact, it probably gets a little bit better. So that's one of the things that I tell people about in these seminars and on social media. Like, hey, just set up an LLC, run it like it's supposed to be run. These are legitimate expenses if you have a legitimate business use for it, and live that way. Don't go crazy. Like that trip to Disney World is not deductible. It's not. But it doesn't mean you can't go have an annual meeting for your LLC at the beach and a portion of that could be deductible to you.
yeah,
It's just teaching people things that I wish they taught us in high school.
for sure.
Like they didn't teach us to balance a checkbook either, but
No.
that's part of adulting.
Yeah,
So welcome to it. I just think a little bit of rudimentary tax law understanding would go a long way for so many people.
for sure. Absolutely. Myself included. All right. So what prompted you to then write a book? Because you're an
Yeah.
attorney, just lawyering on. No.
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. Here's how it really started. I was getting the same conversations with clients. I was answering the same questions. I turned those typical questions I had into an FAQ, frequently asked
Mhm.
questions. And a client would call like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about this." I'm like, "Hey, let me just save you some time. I'm going to shoot this over to you. Take a look at it. Read through it. If you have any questions after you read that, let's talk." Well, that led to me being asked to be on a podcast as a guest. I did that. After that podcast, they asked, "Hey, do you do any writing?" I'm like, "Well, actually, I do writing every day. It's part of my job." Like, "Would you be interested in writing some articles?" I'm like, "Sure." So, 2 articles a month, and they were published on that podcast and their website. After a year of writing 2 articles a month, I had enough content that when I put it all together and I put an outline to it, I'm like, it's a small book right now, but it could be a bigger book.
Yeah.
And so I extrapolated that out, got a little bit more detailed into it, and created the book. And so now when people ask, "Hey, do you have time to talk about this?" I'm like, I wrote a book on this. Why don't you check out the book and let's talk after you read it? It'll answer a lot of your questions and it'll explain so much. I didn't expect it would require me to have a social media presence like it does, because typically I don't really enjoy it, but now it's just part of my life. And I film like every 2 weeks or so, and we put out, I think every other day we're putting out a video or something, just a small little something.
Yeah.
Recently I've been talking about current events with the tax law policy changes that are coming, like the no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, the bringing the bonus depreciation back to 100%. You're just kind of telling people, hey, this is what they said. It may happen, but there's so much that goes into that. Occasionally there'll be something like fun. I'll talk about a client story. So for your viewers today, one of my really good friends is in Hawk with the IRS. And so I'm trying to figure out a way around that. And I was talking to his partner today, and it's like an $8 million tax bill.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, well, I think I have an idea and I think it'll work. So, I'm now starting to put the pieces in place for that client and friend to resolve this for him. It is a lot of money.
Mhm. I'm
And
sure it would
funny
triple
enough,
that.
4 million of it is penalties and interest.
Oh, oh, geez.
I
Yeah.
know, man. He's a good friend. And I'm like, why didn't you call me like 4 years ago? Why did you let it get this way?
Yeah.
But it is what it is. And let's tackle it head on and resolve it.
Oh, man.
I know this kind
So
of makes you
far.
go, oh. So
What was the name of your book again?
it's Replace Your Income, a lawyer's guide to finding, funding, and managing real estate.
Got it. I'm gonna find it. Not
Yeah, I
there
think
yet.
it's on Amazon.
Okay. Cool.
But you mentioned something earlier about cost segregation studies. There's a misconception about cost segregation studies. A lot of people think you can just go online and you can pay for these cost segregation studies and that'll do it. Well, these are actually studies. What does that mean? It means that you have to have an engineer come out to your property,
Right.
measure, take photos, document everything. And you can't really do that online, right? If you plug in all your information you think you know, and then the IRS comes back and says, hey, we're going to audit this. And if it doesn't match up, we're going to disallow this deduction. That could be a massive hit to you. I mean, think about it. And you mentioned it earlier, like accelerating the depreciation. Imagine if your depreciation deduction for that year, let's call it $30,000, got reversed and they disallowed it. Well, now you could possibly owe, $10,000 or something.
Right.
So having the right kind of cost segregation study performed is critical. I've paid for cost segregation studies before. I've had accountants do them, and quite frankly, when the accountants do them, I get a little nervous. I'm like, hey, look, I'm just going to go hire this engineering company, and let's just pick one that I know of. It's a group out of New Hampshire, and I think they're MCS, I believe is what they are, but they actually send out engineers
Right.
and they walk the property, they measure the property. So they come out with measuring tapes and like, okay, it's this wide and it's this tall, it's this thick, and you've got wires here and wires there. They do a phenomenal job of cost seg studies. So that is such a critical part of real estate investing. And I don't think it's ever going to go anywhere. The tax code encourages certain behaviors. And one of those is creating real estate for housing. I think the cost segregation study concept is well entrenched in it and it's safe. I don't see it going away.
Yeah, I hope not. Oh man, if they did that, it would cause a very dramatic shift and it would disincentivize to a certain extent. They're both bad things. Getting rid of cost seg and rent control.
Yeah, I think rent control, and we don't have it here in Tennessee, but I know that it exists in a lot of the northeastern states and bigger cities like Chicago and New York and maybe in DC, possibly in Philly. I don't think it's a great thing. I don't think rent control helps anybody. Yeah, it makes properties more affordable, but it also makes the properties less valuable.
Right. And yeah, it's all over California.
Yeah,
And I guess it goes back to what you're talking about with reframing the discussion. Nobody wants to price out people or make housing unaffordable, but on the ownership side of the equation, you don't realize that you only see, oh, my rent is not going to be increased. But in reality, what's happening is it disincentivizes the owner from adequately maintaining the property and keeping it up, which is the exact opposite of what you want. So you result in with these rundown properties, and then you're like, oh, my landlord's a slumlord. And you touched on it earlier, like the so when I was a young broker, I was walking a deal with a client and he'd built like 20,000 units through his career. And I was like, Bill, how are you going to turn this thing around? Of 260 units, 280 units, something like that, 70% occupied, just a mess. And it's easy. You offer a clean, safe place to live and you respond to maintenance requests, you'll always have tenants. And then I've got another set of clients that have taken it a step further, and this has become my philosophy with the properties that I'm doing a renovation. Clean, safe place to live, respond to maintenance requests. But if you then also offer the nicest units in the submarket, you'll have your choice of the best tenants, and you'll also be able to charge the highest rent. You
right.
have
I think
you
you're
have that.
absolutely right by reframing it that way. And what we did, and this is a little story that might scare your listeners a little bit, but we had a property manager managing our portfolio in Chattanooga, and they sent us a 1099 after the end of the year. And I was looking at this 1099, I'm like, there's no way. And so I started matching up our bank account. I'm like, well, here's the statement, here's the money. He's like $44,000 higher on this 1099 than what we have here. Like, that's not how a 1099 works. He needs to send us Whatever he made, he takes that out and he sends us the difference. That's what we get the 1099 for. So I immediately called my accountant. I'm like, hey, I need you to go through these invoices and see, like, what do you see here? Is there double charging? What's going on? And she found out that he was charging the tenants for repairs and then charging us for the same repairs. He was encouraging them to pay late because, according to our agreement, he got to keep the late fee.
Mm.
He kept 100% of the late fee. So rent's due on the first, it's late after the fifth, and then there's a 10% fee, the amount of the rent. Well, he would encourage them to pay something between the first and the fifth. Then he would get that late fee would get assessed, and then he would encourage them, hey, just pay it by the end of the month with your late fee, you're good. So we were never getting 100% of the rent because this started rolling across months. He was straddling months at one point. And so what we should have been making every month was like $8,500 net, and we never got that. So I went, and once I got this report, I looked at it and like, oh my God, what has he been doing? Cleared my calendar, went down to Chattanooga, knocked on every single door that we owned, told them who I was, why I was there, what's happening. I'm like, I'm now your landlord. I'm also the owner. Here's how you're going to pay your rent. We set up a program. We got a platform called Buildium, and we put all of our properties into Buildium. And you can't pay cash anymore. You can't pay checks. You can't pay money orders. It all has to go through this system. If you don't pay it through the system, we will evict you.
Yeah.
Of 13 single family homes, I evicted 11. And I found pit bulls, stripper poles, drug needles, people living in the houses that we had no idea who they were. There was no lease. We didn't know who this person was. So went and cleaned house. Then we tapped into our equity line of credit and called up LP, which is LP Building Products, and said, hey, we need new roofs, new siding, new windows, new doors, new gutters, do it all. So we spent about $600,000 refurbishing every single house. And to your point, now that we're the landlords, we have the nicest houses on the block. We started getting the better tenants.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these streets in Chattanooga is called Rawlings. We own 2 properties there. Police camera number 1 is in front of one of our properties. That's how bad that street was.
Yeah.
The entire street has started to turn. So we turned 2 of the houses. Somebody across the street from one of our houses turned 2 houses. Now the whole street's turning. And it's not the scariest street anymore. It's actually really nice. We took the rent from one property from $600 a month up to $1,200 a month, and we're making it.
Yeah.
And I mean, $1,200 a month.
The point is it doubled. It's a stark contrast, but the
We
more,
slowly
yeah.
moved it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we invested the money in the houses to make them nice, and we cleared out the bad tenants, brought in the good tenants, changed the entire neighborhood. And I got to tell you, man, it is fascinating to watch these people that are living in these dilapidated houses. And you're like, hey, you know, my handyman's coming over today. I see your doors need some work. Let me send him over and help you out. And no charge to you. We're just happy you're here.
Right.
And then suddenly you're starting to create a community that people are proud of, and they want to take care of the homes. So, you know, I think there's a little bit of social engineering going on with real estate, but I'm happy to be part of it and I'm happy to give back. But to your point, yeah, I mean, nobody cares about your money more than you do. And when you put that kind of money into real estate, you can actually have the better tenants and the better rents. So, you know, I'm really happy with what we've done down there.
That's great. We've got a group that we do a lot of deals with, and we'll help go full cycle on the acquisition. We'll invest with them, and then we'll go to sell it. And oftentimes we're just comping against their other properties because those are the ones that support the rents.
Yeah.
So it's a case study in how to do that.
Yeah, and a lot of people get down in the mouth about Section 8, and in Chattanooga they're paying market rents.
Section 8 will pay higher than whatever market is. And if you get
There is.
evicted, you go back to the end of the line and it could be a 2 to 5 year wait.
Typically
So
it's 5 years. So if you
yeah.
get evicted, it is 5 years you're off the Section 8 program. And I know that there's a 2-year waiting period in Chattanooga right now, and I think in Birmingham, Alabama as well. And they've actually closed the waiting list. So there's a
Mm,
waiting list to get on the waiting list. If you
yeah.
think about that, I mean, that's how desperate we are as a country right now for affordable housing. Now, I'm not a sociologist, but I think I'm doing my part for my community, and I hope it's appreciated and I hope it's successful. But, we have a big problem in this country with people not being able to afford rent. And I don't have the answer to it. I don't know what the answer is. Does it mean everything becomes Section 8? Does it mean rent control goes in everywhere? The answer is, outside of my pay grade, but
Yeah.
I'm willing to do my part and invest and
Yeah.
my money where my mouth is.
You mentioned a little bit earlier some other changes to the tax code that may be on the horizon. Care to expand on that? What do you
Well,
see?
the 2017 tax cuts, there's a big push to make those permanent, which I think would be great. I also think it would be very helpful to increase the annual exclusion amount and to increase, if not eliminate, the estate tax.
Mm,
Quite frankly, the only people you're hurting with the estate tax are small businesses, farmers, the people that really need that to pass that along. That's a way of life,
right.
it's an income, and people are having to fire sell assets and family farms just to meet the estate tax bill. So that's one of the things that I see as a problem. Another thing, I think our corporate tax rate is, even though it's at 21%, I think reducing it to 15% would be better. It'd be more in line with other countries that are competitive with us. For example, Ireland, a couple of years
Yeah.
ago.
Apple is legally headquartered in Ireland.
That is true. And they're legally headquartered there because they have a lower tax rate. Why can't we do that? We're the wealthiest country in the world. Why can't we do that?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the things that needs to happen. Now, there's this big push for the carried interest loophole to close. I'm not going to get into carried interest on this podcast. It can be a little bit Byzantine at times, but I think less regulation, lower
Mhm.
taxes, be good stewards of the wheel that we do have would be very beneficial to the growth of not only the economy, but it would reduce interest rates and it would allow more investing opportunities to take place. Right now, with the way things are and fighting off 40-year inflation highs and skyrocketing interest rates, even though the Fed met yesterday and didn't reduce, I do think we're probably due another quarter point reduction. I think that would go a long way to say, hey, it's a new day, less regulation. We're going to try to get back to business as usual. But until that happens with the Fed, and I don't know what Chairman Powell's going to do, but I really hope he reduces the interest rates at the next meeting in April.
Yeah, that would be helpful for everyone.
I agree. And maybe give us a 50-point drop. That'd be great.
Go.
I'm just like, hey, let's do this. Let's
Yeah.
get. So those are some of the things that I've seen that I think, our tax policy could tackle. And I wouldn't be surprised if this administration and the Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee got together and said, hey, yeah, we could make this work. I think there is a path forward there. And, for the average person, it could mean a few more $1,000s of savings every year, which is phenomenal. So that's what I see on the horizon. But I don't see it happening until September at the earliest.
The wheels of government don't, they're not known for their speed, but
Not
you
at
know,
all.
I do think that some of the auditing that Doge and Elon are doing is a great thing.
Agree.
Questions
Agree.
around what's going to happen with all these GSA assets, but and what's that going to do to the markets? DC is going to be the most, DC and Northern Virginia is going to be the most heavily impacted. But even here in Cincinnati, we're midway on that list of federally owned government assets. And some of these are office buildings that nobody goes to.
Absolutely. We had 4 buildings here in the Nashville, Franklin area get their leases terminated by Doge. And it's because one was an IRS building that was huge. I want to say the lease every year was like $4 million or something. I'm like, nobody goes to work there. I didn't even know that building existed.
Yeah, what's the
And it was
point?
completely empty.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah,
So
so I think getting rid of some of that unnecessary government spending and bloat, there overall it's going to be a net positive.
I agree. And I'm thrilled to see what Doge is doing.
Hmm.
I mean,
Me too.
just pulling the curtain back on these expenditures that we as regular citizens going to work every day don't know anything about. Like, why is there a $20 million payment going to Iraq for a Sesame Street show? What? Why?
Yeah.
And then you read some of these, pet projects that are going on out there, and you're like, what do we have to do with that? Why are we paying for that? No, I really hope that the government waste and abuse really gets curtailed through this, audit process. I was reading an article today that was quoting Secretary Bessent saying that the IRS is losing about 80% of its budget every year to contractors that are supposed to be out there collecting back taxes, but they're being paid so much by the IRS that it's chewing up 80% of their budget. I'm like, that's insane.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
another thing about the
think about
inefficiencies.
that. It's like, oh my God, I was a sophomore in college.
I was in seventh grade.
Yeah. And it's like, man, you're 35 years late to meeting a deadline,
Yeah.
and you guys get your panties twisted when we're late paying a tax. Come
Yeah.
on, man.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's dude, we have self-driving cars now. Get in 2025.
yeah. So I did a video on AI and how the IRS is starting to use AI to create patterns in tax filings. And the concept is they can almost estimate when you will like take a certain deduction or have a loss. They can, for the most part, estimate when you're going to pull something on them. And I'm like, that is scary. That is some Tom
Yeah.
Cruise, stuff.
Yeah. That
I just can't
Minority Report.
imagine,
Yeah.
the IRS showing at your door and like, hey, we know you're about to file a fraudulent tax return, and we're going to go ahead and arrest you now.
The easy way to avoid that is just don't do fraud.
Fair
Maybe
point.
sometimes, yeah, no, it could be used against you as well. Oh, you've done these things and you need to come with us now.
Yeah, we've looked up in the Ohio area at some investment opportunities. Ohio, especially in the Cleveland area, there's a lot of opportunity up there. Not only from a affordable housing standpoint, but from a midterm rental standpoint, given the fact that you have the Cleveland Clinic,
Yeah.
you draw in a lot of medical professionals that need a 3-month stay somewhere, and there's just no housing for them. And
Well,
if
I
they
mean,
stay in hotels, it gets really expensive.
I'm here in Cincinnati and we've got a lack of about 30,000 housing units across the spectrum perpetually since I've been in market. And I got here in 2011. So it's you build it, it will come thing. But it's just talk about government bureaucracy, just trying to work through some of the rules and regulations and not even trying to be nefarious about it, just trying to follow the rules. And it's a challenge to say the least.
It's a challenge. I'm dealing with codes in the various code departments around the different municipalities. Like everybody's got a different rule, and it's just
Yeah.
okay. Let me figure this one out.
And even township to township,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
in different processes.
Like we were waiting on one inspector to come look at this property so we could turn it over to Section 8, and he's like, "Well, you know, you shouldn't have caulked that window that way." I'm like, "You're gonna fail the inspection over the caulk that seals the window from the outside,
Right.
the bureaucracy is just, it's out of control. It's just out of control, and it's doing more damage than good.
And I do want to make this point because I think people on a different side of the political spectrum than what it seems like you and I are on, they're afraid of the MAGA movement or making America great again. But it's the onshoring of companies like Apple and having them back here and paying their taxes to the American government, not the Irish government. I think that's what it's about. It's about the economics of it. And that's, think about it, like I think that's a large part of what it's about.
So there was an economist by the name of Hayek that wrote a book, and I think it's called The Road to Serfdom. And it had like 10 rules that you had to follow, like 10 precepts. And those precepts you could overlay across any industry, any government, anything, and it makes sense. And
Mhm.
so when I look at real estate investing or the government writ large, I'm like, if we would just do more with less, less government. It's like right now there's a push to eliminate the Department of Education. Okay, great. Let's do that. Let's take that money that was allocated to the Department of Education and send it directly to the states to use.
Yeah.
Let them use it for their own education.
Why do we need an overriding government agency that is just another layer of administration and bureaucracy?
And we don't. And let's get back to a smaller, leaner federal government. Let's get back to allowing the states to run their own interests and take care of their own citizens. And maybe we'll all be wealthier in the long run. And I think that's not a bad objective. Call it MAGA, call it whatever you want.
Right.
I think running this country like a business is really a good idea. Isn't that what we are anyway? We're just a very large business.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
So, let's treat it like a business. Let's have accountability. Like, where are you spending your budget? Oh, you're funding Sesame Street in Iraq for $20 million. Oh, you're paying $2,000 for a hammer. Why are you doing that?
Right.
And then you suddenly start seeing these reports on what is being funded and how much it's costing. No wonder we have a deficit.
Why are you paying $2,000 for a hammer when it's, I don't know, $20
$20
at
at Ace
most?
Hardware, right?
Right.
Like, why?
Yeah.
So, no, I completely agree with you on that. I just think that smaller, more efficient, stronger federal government is the way to go here, and send the money back to the states. Send the citizens their tax money back.
Hmm. I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Right. Because that's the worst sentence you could ever hear.
That's the worst thing you could hear.
It really is. But, to the genesis of this conversation about real estate and the slow man's 1031, that's just my way of trying to educate people on, look, even if you miss the 1031 exchange windows, if you can stay within a calendar year and if you do the right things, you can still get the benefits of that. And so when I talk about taxes on social media, I'm just trying to help people.
Brian, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. And
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's Friday late on the afternoon, but thank you.
if somebody's interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
You can always direct message me at Brian T. Boyd on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. I've got a YouTube channel now. I'm putting up a little bit longer videos there. And, if you want to have a one-on-one with me, there's a link in my bio for a Calendly that you can schedule time with me, and I'll set aside time to talk with you. So that's really the best way to get in touch with me.
Literally slid into your DMs on Instagram.
Yeah, that's how it works. And
Yeah.
you can see I'm as normal as you, and I'm not making that OnlyFans money yet, but
Yeah,
I'm
neither am I.
trying. I'm trying. I've got a dog I'm willing to pimp out. So
Oh, that's good. All
yeah.
right. Thanks so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Hey, thanks for your time.